Hello, and a very warm welcome to everyone. I'll give everyone a few moments just to join. I can see the numbers going up. While we wait, can I just invite you all to the chat box? It would be great to check, first of all, that you can hear us, but also maybe to let us know how old perhaps the child that you have in mind in joining us tonight, maybe where you're from. Be great to hear from you. Thank you. I can see some messages. Lovely. Fantastic. Claire, I think we had over 400 people sign up.
Oh, wow.
That's really exciting. Just a bit of housekeeping. This session is being recorded. So please do feel free just to sit back and enjoy. Tomorrow you will get a copy of the slides, which has clickable links to it, as well as the recording. And at the end, you will have an opportunity to ask questions. Claire and I will be keeping an eye on the chat box throughout, but we will do our very best to answer your questions at the end. So I think I should probably get started. We have a lot of people with us this evening, so it's really lovely to have you with us tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. A quick introduction. My name is Laura, and I was a teacher for many years. I taught for 12 years, and that ranged from in a mainstream setting from the head of early years to teaching year 6. I then trained in psychodynamic therapy before joining Role Models, and I will tell you a little bit about Role Models as we go on. It is worth mentioning that I myself am not neurodiverse, so the information that I share with you is from my experience of working with various professionals and various children, but it's not from my personal lived experience. And I will pass on to Claire.
Hi everyone, my name is Claire Wally and I'm really excited to be part of this webinar today. So I am the founder of the SEN Expert. So the SEN Expert is an education consultancy service, but it's solely focused on the world of special educational needs. Our goal is to provide young people with a creative route to the personal and professional lives that they deserve, and basically to try and help parents along the way. As you probably have all found already, it's a quite complex world to understand, to navigate. There's so many different hurdles in terms of getting support from professionals, working with schools, working with local authorities. So the aim of the SEN Expert is to help you along that way with some really honest, frank and compassionate advice. We work in 3 main areas. So firstly, with professionals and schools, providing training, coaching and whole school reviews. We do an awful lot of work with families, parents, and most importantly, their children and young people within those family units. So under that title, we offer support with EHCPs. So that's applications, reviewing paperwork, and if needed, supporting with tribunals. We help find really great schools for people with special educational needs. We offer advocacy work and also coaching for parents and families. And lastly, by no means least, we support children and young people through tutoring, mentoring, and also diagnosis support sessions, where we look at actually what a diagnosis means for a child. We teach them how their brain is working and then give them tips and tricks so that they can be kind of independent in their diagnosis and use it as a superpower rather than something that they might find challenging. Our website is at the bottom, www.senexpert.co.uk, and if you scan the QR code on the right hand side, that will take you to our Instagram. It is a ever-growing online community of parents, professionals, all sorts of different people on there. We try to share lots of advice, lots of tips. We do lots of interviews on there as well. So if you are interested, do give us a follow, because it's a nice way of having a kind of daily feed of information around all things SEN.
Fantastic, thank you. And we will both do our best to fill you in with a little bit of information about where we might be able to offer you support. For those who've just joined, I just want to say, I mentioned this before, this is being recorded and you will get the slides, so no need to take any notes. Okay, so let's get started why we are here today. at Role Models, our biggest focus is giving children the confidence that they need in order to thrive, to help them manage their emotions and to develop friendships. For us, these skills are absolutely paramount to good mental health, to be able to thrive academically and to be able to understand themselves. As a former teacher, I am incredibly passionate about formal education, but I think a lot of these skills that we sometimes notice children are lacking are teachable skills. If a child was struggling in maths, we would intervene. But if they're struggling with their confidence or their resilience, we should also be intervening. We should also be giving them these tools. So the way we do that, and I've had lots of questions, so I'll make sure that I tell you later, is we do that through our sort of fun after school online club. In small groups, we work with trained facilitators like the lovely Bridget in the middle, who support children in developing these skills through games, through role play, through storytelling. I will come on to that. Why we do what we do? Well, the first is to improve their mental health and well-being. If a child feels good about themselves, if they understand themselves, if they understand how to communicate, how to relate to other people, they will be happier. We see ourselves as more of a prevention rather than a cure. We don't stand in the place of psychological support, but we do work with child psychologists who have validated our courses as a good preventative method. Increasing academic attainment, children who are sat in a class feeling confident, feeling like they're not scared to take risks, feeling as though they can ask for help, they can engage with others, will thrive academically. And then enhancing future job prospects. I know we have quite a range of age groups here, but just to quickly say that the World Economic Forum published the skills that they felt were most valuable in the workplace. And they are things like emotional intelligence, creativity, cognitive flexibility, thinking critically, problem solving. Again, these are skills that we really believe we should be empowering children with. We often work with families who say, you know, my child isn't thriving academically, but they're such skilled, you know, they're so skilled in their creativity, they're so skilled in their ability to negotiate. And so we really like to nurture these other skills as well. And we do that under our 4 key themes: resilience, leadership, creative problem solving, and collaboration. And we are all here tonight to talk about resilience. And resilience is a bit of a buzzword at the moment. So by the end of the webinar, it would be great that we all agree with what we mean by resilience. What are we talking about? We are going to cover 3 main ways to develop it. So 3 things that you can do at home with your children or young people to help develop resilience. We're going to give you some tools and strategies for doing so. And then at the end, like I said, we've got some resources for you. And when these get sent around, they all have clickable links for you to be able to access them. So what is resilience? I do invite you to the chat box. So please do feel free, but if you're not inclined, that's absolutely fine. What is it that we mean by resilience? Maybe hold your child or your young person in mind and think about what it is that you want for them. You're here because we're talking about resilience. Maybe where is it lacking for them? Where are you noticing the struggles? Picking yourself up when you fall, ability to recover quickly from adverse situations, picking themselves up after setbacks, coping with change, absolutely. And the ability to cope on a day-to-day basis, coping with frustration. I think we're definitely all singing from the same hymn sheet here. So how would you define it? So we define it as getting comfortable with discomfort. And something that's really key is that none of you had said avoiding setbacks. None of you said avoiding frustration, avoiding hurt, because that's just not the human experience. The human experience is alongside the excitement, the happiness, the comfort, the friendship, all these positive things, comes experience of frustration, sadness, anger. And what we want to do is arm our children and young people with the tools to manage it. So it's getting comfortable with discomfort. What can we do in those moments that really sit outside our comfort zone to help us tolerate it? So that's that distress tolerance. What can we do in that moment when things perhaps really feel like they're tipping us over to just manage that? Self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is something we talk a lot about role models. And I suppose it's that inner belief in yourself. If we were to arm our children and young people with self-efficacy, it might mean that when these challenges and setbacks happen, they ultimately believe in their ability to cope. They might not know how they're going to cope. They might not really understand the path through it, but they know that deep down they can trust themselves. They know that somehow they'll pull through it. And what we're going to do is we're going to discuss what we can do to really build that self-efficacy. So what it is not, and I hope this is really good news for those of you listening and perhaps being concerned about your children or your young people, or maybe even yourself, is it is not a fixed trait. And that's something that we discussed and we touched upon at the beginning. Why aren't we intervening? Let's intervene. If it is a trait that we can grow, we can nurture, let's do that. And it is never too late. So for those sitting with children who are slightly older, please do not worry, because quite often we have parents say, I'm going to work on these things, I'm going to build my resilience, and it's always possible and it is never too late. And as we mentioned, it is not pushing difficult emotions away. And I know Claire is going to touch on masking a little bit later, but emotions is not pretending not to feel something and not avoiding those sad feelings. So we touched on this, when, where, and how you notice that in your family. Some of you might be, it might be that when your child's at school outside their comfort zone, they really struggle, or perhaps they struggle to break their routine, or they struggle to be in new situations, whatever it is. Think of the impact that it has on your family and perhaps how that might be if that weren't the case. So I'm going to not show this now, but again, there's a click of a link to it. It's a video on growth mindset. And at Role Models, we talk a lot about growth mindset, and it's the thought that we're just not there yet. So I always say, I'm just not a good runner, because I'm not. I can make it to the end of my road and then I'm out of breath and I'm done. But really, if I wanted to be a good runner, there are things I could do. I might never be the best runner, but I can most certainly improve. I could do the couch to 5K, I could get good rest and nutrition, I could read about endurance and how to do it. I'm not a good runner because, quite frankly, I put zero effort into becoming a good runner. So what that means for our children is we'll hear them say at different points, I'm just not good at maths, or I am not a good speller, or I'm not very sporty. And while that might be the case, and it's very important that we're authentic, if our child gets 1 out of 10 in a spelling test, there's no good telling them they're a great speller because it's not going to reassure them. But we use this word yet. Okay, so we're not there yet. What can we do to improve? We're not thinking about being the best. We're not thinking about how to be amazing, but what could we do to get that step better, that little bit better at trying new things, that little bit better at stepping out our comfort zone, or at doing maths, or at making new friends, whatever it is, what can we do to improve? So here are some suggestions, some shared language that you can use with your child or young person. What I would say is that not all of these things will work. They might not all work the first time. So I invite you to try these things and see how they go. So when a child says it's too hard, something we discussed a lot at Role Models is what's actually happening when something's difficult. When you learn new things, you're creating new neural pathways. Your brain is growing. So much like when you're at the gym and you're lifting those heavy weights to build muscles, it's hard. But that's because you're getting better. That's because you're improving. So what if we're less resistant to that feeling of it being hard and we start to embrace it? Yeah, it is hard. You're stretching your brain, you're helping it get stronger. Now, I'm not saying the first time you say that to your child or young person, they'll say, oh, okay, great, I'll continue. But it's slowly changing the attitude and mindset around struggling. Yeah, it is hard. It absolutely is hard, because it is hard when we learn new things, but that's really exciting. That's when your brain grows. So then the I'm scared. First of all, I think it's really important to validate feelings and praise children for acknowledging them. So if a child comes to you and says, I'm scared, I think the first thing is to validate it. Yeah, doing new things can feel scary. Because if we think about what we need in moments when we're having some big feelings, if I were to come home and say to my husband, you know, I'm really scared, and he says, no, you're not, you're fine. It wouldn't help at all. It would make me feel quite lonely. I wouldn't feel heard or understood or supported. So it's the same for our children. So we say doing new things can feel scary. Do you remember when? And this is what we can do to build a self-efficacy. See if you can find an example of when your child has overcome something. So maybe it was, you know, do you remember when you started chess and you didn't know anyone there and you were really, really nervous to go? And now look at you, you're thriving, you're doing so well at chess. So yes, absolutely, you might be scared to go to karate, but just remember that you can do it. Then there's the I quit. And in that moment when a child says, I quit, perhaps everything's just getting a bit much. It's all overwhelming. Their feelings have been triggered and perhaps they just need to stop. So we say, show me the hard bit. And what that does is it really tries to get them to focus on the bit that is challenging for them, because quite often it's not the whole thing. So if they're sitting down to do homework and they quit, okay, well, what's the hard part? It's not everything. Opening the page, putting your name at the top, reading the first question. What is the bit that you're struggling with? And the way that builds resilience is it really helps them identify what it is they're struggling with and not sort of catastrophizing the whole thing. I'm stupid for finding it difficult. And this is when we use the word yet. And actually one of our online sessions is the power of yet, because it is so powerful. Again, we must validate their experience. If they're feeling stupid because something's tough, and it is tough for them, there's no point saying, don't worry, you're fine, you're doing well, because it's not authentic. So you just haven't mastered it yet. What might help? And including them in the solution is really important. Can you think of something that might help? And it might be that mummy's sitting down and doing it with you, or taking a break in the garden, or going for a walk, and then really praising them for the fact that they're problem solving. Right, you've identified that it would actually be really helpful if I read the question out loud for you. Well, that's great, let's do that together. Then there's the I don't need feedback. And this is a very much a shift in understanding of what feedback is. And I think it's a long process, but feedback can help you get better. And getting better is more important than being good. And we're going to talk later about how, as a family, as parents, as educators, let's focus on improving. It's not about being perfect. It's not about finishing. It's not about the best. It's about what's the next step in getting it better. And so quite often we use the word and. So if your child has come to you and they've finished their homework, it might sound like, wow, you know, you've used all your capital letters and full stops, that's fantastic. And now let's have a look at our adjectives. It's not, you've done this, but have a go at this. The word and suggests, great, and it's just the next step to getting better. And getting better is what we're focusing on. And again, I don't expect you to say this phrase and your children rush to complete their homework with newfound enthusiasm, but it's that slowly rewiring our understanding that it's not about the finished product, it's just about self-improvement. And then a meltdown of any form. And this, I really stress, is not a phrase you use in the thick of a meltdown. I do not advise any sort of rational processing of anything during the meltdown. You do what they need to feel safe and cope, and you keep things calm and you don't contribute. I think getting a child, when they're triggered in that meltdown, to apply rational thinking is totally counterintuitive. But I think it's important where possible to process things afterwards. And so if the meltdown happens surrounding a friendship problem, perhaps your child has been incredibly upset. They've seen two friends go off on a play date and they weren't invited. And it feels incredibly unfair and it feels incredibly painful, and it's really triggered a overwhelming emotional response. In a calm moment, we like the phrase, I think two things are true here. And the first thing is always to validate the emotion. You feel really sad that you weren't invited. You are feeling so left out and you're feeling really hurt. But the other thing I know is true is that there will be other opportunities to have a play date. Everybody at some point can feel left out, and that's really normal, but I do know you're going to be okay. And I think, again, if we think about what we need as adults when we have our big emotions, to validate them is absolutely key. So this is one that I always I'm very conscious of saying to parents. As a parent myself, there is no perfect parenting. I'm not sitting in my perfect parenting ivory tower here saying that there's some way that we can do this without making mistakes. But we do know that how we respond to our big feelings, to our setbacks, does form the way our children understand them. And so our own levels of resilience are being emulated. So that's not to say if we lack resilience, our children are without hope, but it's just about saying, let's be really mindful of the way we speak, of the way we respond, and there's always an opportunity to repair. There's always an opportunity to say, you know what, I got so cross when I baked the cake for the 5th time and it was still burnt. But actually, I don't think that shouting really helped because the cake was still burnt. And I'm really sorry if that made you feel scared or anxious. But actually, I think that next time, I'm just going to try and have another go. You know, you can process it with them. If you have responded in a way that you don't think was your best, you can go back and have another go. Now, this last one, I think for all parents, this will ring true. We are biologically programmed to want to protect our children. I always remember when my eldest was very little, we went to a soft play. And my husband always jokes that these two bigger boys came over and pushed her off something, and I zoomed in like some sort of enraged tiger willing to like pull them off. We're biologically programmed to want to step in, and so when we see our children struggle, our instinct is to stop it, to preempt it, to step in and support. And I'm not saying we shouldn't do that, but we're going to explore how we can be slightly more mindful in how we do that. So 3 things that resilient people do. What I've got here is I've got a link to a TED talk by Lucy Hone. I won't play it now, but I really do encourage you to watch it. Lucy Hone was an expert on resilience, and she did a lot of research and she wrote a lot about resilience. And then very tragically, a personal tragedy happened in her family, and it really tested everything she understood about resilience. And so she's done this TED talk, and in it she has explored 3 different traits of resilient people. And that's something I'm going to go on to talk to you about, but I do know that Claire wanted to put this sort of the neurodiverse understanding on it.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to sort of chip in here because I think it's really important to not kind of cling on to this word of resilience and see it as a word that's describing a child who may be, I don't know, seem the most confident in the class, or the child that is taking on something that's really risky or something that's quite a big ask of a child. I think when we're thinking about children who are neurodiverse, even them just putting on their school shoes and stepping into a classroom, that is a hugely resilient thing for them to be doing. So whilst we're thinking about these kind of big terms of, you want them to be confident, you want them to kind of believe in themselves, you want them to be able to, I suppose, stand up for themselves. I think it's very worthwhile thinking that actually neurodiverse children have got almost a big queue of other things that they're having to cope with before they've even got to that point, and that us as educators and parents should be praising those small steps as well as the things that fall under that big title of resilient. And I think sometimes we link the word resilience with, I don't know, let's try and think of an example. Someone does, I don't know, climbs a mountain, aren't they resilient? They went on a huge challenge, it was really tricky for them. Whereas actually resilience sometimes can be the small stuff, and that is something that we need to remember as professionals, parents, whoever that are supporting these children. And resilience can mean that confidence, but it also can mean learning and owning coping strategies. So if a child is feeling anxious about going into a classroom because they find that there's too many people in there, it's too busy, it's overwhelming, there's too much sensory information for them, them being able to learn and kind of manage a coping strategy as actually them showing great resilience. And it might be something that we don't see, it's just them doing within themselves, and it's those little bits that we can teach them along the way. But I thought it was important to pop in there and just highlight to parents that it doesn't need to be the big stuff, it can be the small stuff. And actually a child who's in, I don't know, in school, in assembly, and is totally overwhelmed and isn't coping, actually is showing some resilience in some respects because they're there, they showed up, they're giving it a go. So I think, yeah, remember, resilience comes in small packages as well as big ones as well.
A few questions I've just picked up in the chat box. Yes, this is being recorded, so you will be able to access this if you've come a bit late. There's some talk, Claire, about we're asking children to have coping strategies for a system that's not suited to them. And what I would say is we are not making comments on the system. We are simply thinking about ideas and tools that we can give our children and young people to best support them. I don't want to suggest that we're trying to make them fit into a system, but it's what can we do to boost their ability to cope with the situation that they're in. So the three things that resilient people do, the first one is that they know difficult things happen. So what does that look like? It's that understanding, and we discussed at the beginning, that we're not trying to avoid difficult things happening because that's just not possible. So it's an understanding and an acceptance that sometimes difficult things happen. And it's about not having that victim mentality, that why me. And Claire and I were talking before that the sense of justice can be very, very strong and powerful for some neurodiverse thinkers. And so what can we do to support them with that understanding? And we discussed that actually sometimes it's about validating that something feels really unfair and acknowledging, yes, you're not allowed screen time and your friend is after school, and that feels really unfair. And validating that emotion and listening. That doesn't mean that our boundaries have to change. That doesn't mean that we have to accommodate, but it also just introduces the idea that sometimes things aren't fair and that we can struggle with our emotions about how we feel about it. We're not entitled to perfection. And so acknowledging that is really key. Now, what can we do at home to cultivate this? The first is don't hide difficult emotions when things happen, obviously in a child-appropriate way. It's okay to share with them when your day didn't go as well as you wanted it to, when things happened to you that weren't great, when you felt certain injustices happen. Share with them. Sometimes I think we feel a lot of responsibility as parents to create this perfect, everything's great, everything's fine. They come home from school and we're fresh-faced and unfazed by anything. But it's actually okay to sometimes say, I did a lot of work for something. I tried really, really hard and it wasn't right. and I feel really frustrated and I feel a bit sad because I put a lot of effort into it. Or share with them perhaps times when you felt left out at school. You know, I really can remember when 2 of my school friends went on a play date and I wasn't invited. And I remember that feeling of feeling really hurt. So perhaps when my daughter comes home feeling sad and left out, instead of saying, don't worry about it, it's fine, it doesn't matter, connecting to that feeling. Yeah, I get it. I get it. I remember that feeling and it doesn't feel good.
I also think, adding on to that, supporting children understanding those kind of big feelings, I found in my teaching that actually naming the physical element of an emotion has helped some children who I've supported who are neurodiverse in actually understanding where I'm coming from and trying to help them manage that feeling or that situation. And initially it can feel quite strange, but saying things such as, I think you're really angry because I can see that you're clenching your fists and that you're breathing slightly quickly or quicker. That means that they're able to actually see something physically in themselves and acknowledge that you've noticed it as well. So it starts to build a kind of a trust, and it's not just another adult coming in and telling them that their reaction isn't valid or they're doing something wrong or that you don't understand where they're coming from, and taking it right back to that kind of physical element of the emotion. The play date example is a great one. You could, say, oh, I can tell by your face you look really disappointed, or I can see it, I think you're quite sad because it looks like you've got tears in your eyes. And naming something that's physically happening to them makes it easier for them to feel, oh, okay, well, mum understands where I'm coming from, or teacher understands, because often children are, as you said, their emotions are dismissed and it's, oh, it's all fine, don't worry about it, carry on. Or because their behavior may have been challenging in the past, they are told off or they're sanctioned for the reaction, when actually the cause of the issue is actually totally fair and they should be having, a reaction to it at the level that they are. So I just wanted to mention, that kind of physical element can be a nice way in. And if it's a good time now to mention about masking.
Yes, please.
Knowing that difficult things can happen is obviously important for parents, professionals, etc. And I think it's really important here that we do mention masking and explain what it is, because sometimes you can have situations whereby parents are seeing a very different child to what teachers are seeing, and it's because often children who are neurodiverse will mask their true feelings to fit in with the social norms, say, of the classroom or the playground. So you may have situations where parents are saying, oh, my child's coming home and they're really upset, they're really anxious, they're coming home and they're having meltdowns, they're really overwhelmed, and teachers are saying, oh, we don't see that in school. And it's because they are doing something, I think it was really, really clever, and they are reading the room, they're reading a social situation, and they are making themselves fit in, but actually it's a mask, and they are feeling completely anxious and completely worried about something, and managing that all day long is super tiring. So I think the title of, knowing that difficult things happen, yes, we want our children to understand that, but we also want our teachers and professionals to understand that as well. And just because a difficult moment isn't played out really evidently on a child's face, or because they smile and nod and make out that everything's fine, that might not always be the case. So it can be tricky at times to kind of work out if it is masking or if a child is actually fine. And it's all about building trusting relationships. So make sure as a parent you talk to school, so you can say, oh, this happened today, so I'll be interested to see how they are when they go home. Vice versa, you can say, oh, we had a really rough night, little one didn't want to go to sleep, so we think that they might find the morning a bit challenging. So I think masking is important because children may not present their true feelings instantly. It's not like, oh, I can 100% see that you're angry, or I can 100% see you're sad, and they're carrying that kind of job of masking emotions through the whole school day, and that's really quite tiring. So make sure that parents are aware, professionals, teachers, that masking is something that you may come across, and how to navigate that can be quite a personal experience from child to child, but firstly having an awareness that it exists is a really great step forward.
Absolutely, thank you. One question we had was, this seems very specific to children who are at school, and I must say that actually they can be applied widely. The situations we give might be related to school, but really that understanding that sometimes tough things happen can apply in any setting. We have lots of homeschooled children on our masterclass. And so these services that we both provide aren't specifically for children who are in schools. Also, what you were saying, Claire, about identifying where your feelings are in your body, we actually do have one of our sessions which is just that. It's drawing our bodies and thinking, well, where do we feel that feeling of anger? And for different people, it's different places that perhaps children don't understand. And it's not just children who happen to be neurodiverse, it could be anybody, that feeling in their belly, that butterfly feeling, is because they're feeling scared. And we assume this understanding that children know, well, if they've got a sore tummy, it's just because they're anxious. No, let's spell that out to them, because that can feel really overwhelming. Or when your heart is pounding because perhaps you're scared or you're angry, that can feel hugely overwhelming. So in our masterclass sessions, we actually explain to children what is going on in our body, and let's normalize it. And what anger feels like to you might feel very different to me, and we might experience it in different places. So these are the ways that you can cultivate that, supporting your children. Do not hide your hard times, allow them to experience hard times. So that might be that if there are two children on a play date, or from personal experience, if my child has kicked off something at soft play, let them feel it out themselves. Let's see if they can solve it themselves. Let's not always rush in to be the person to fix it. And then build their capacity and self-belief that they can cope with it. So the next time something happens, you can say, but do you remember that time where you felt this way before and you coped? And the only way we can build that understanding that they can cope is if we give them opportunity to cope. So what might this look like? So we've given some different examples, but what this really is aimed to do is to invite you and me, us as parents, to question whether our instincts are helping or not. So it could be that your 3-year-old's struggling to put on their shoes and we rush to put them on for them. And sometimes you're rushing out the door and actually you do not have time to build resilience by letting them try 15 times. They need their shoes on and they need to get into the car. But sometimes, is it okay to let our children struggle with whatever that situation is? It might be putting shoes on, it might be getting dressed in the morning, it might be working out where on the table to sit for breakfast if their specific seat isn't available. What if we take that little step back and let them start to navigate it? We don't have to disappear. I'm not saying let your children fend for themselves and struggle, but what I'm saying is, are we stepping in too soon? With an older child, it might look like they have a fallout with their friend and you instantly pick up the phone to mediate. Is there a way that we can involve our child in the process? Maybe ask them what it is that you can do to help. And if they say, please, can you call the mum, then by all means do so. But the other day I was working with a parent and the child was very upset about where they were sat in the classroom. And the mum called me and said, listen, I don't quite know what to do because it's not a big deal. They should be fine where they sit, but it's actually really bothering her. Should I just call the teacher? And actually we agreed that the solution was that the child, who was able to, but to write to the teacher and to say, this is how it makes me feel. Is it possible that I moved? And that just involves them in the fixing process. It makes them feel slightly more empowered. It's not only okay because mum stepped in, but actually I'm capable. I solved this. I spoke to my teacher. And again, this is very much applicable to your specific children, to their understanding, to their needs. But I just invite you to start questioning how much we step in as parents and if there are opportunities for us to slightly step back. So the next trait of a resilient person is they choose where to give their attention. Now, again, this might not be possible if you have a child who ruminates tremendously. It's not necessarily something that you can solve with a, well, just don't think about that. What we're doing is we're just inviting different strategies that might work for your child. And what can we do to stop that attention always going on the negative? And perhaps as parents, we think of ourselves like that. You know, we know that we ruminate on the tough things. We know we can have a disproportionate focus. So what can we do? So one of the things we like to do at Role Models is to support families in creating a culture of just hunting the good stuff. Now, that doesn't always have to be in response to something bad happening, but just that tradition of what is there that's good. So maybe you've gone on a family trip somewhere to the coast and it's pouring down with rain and it's all gone wrong and you've been stuck in traffic and it's all terrible. And we've all had those days. But is there an opportunity to have your family motto, but at least you got to have ice cream in the car, at least you got to sing your favourite songs on the radio? Can you practice finding some opportunity to hunt something good? I've got a link here to a gratitude journal. Again, this may or may not work for your child, but can you invite an opportunity to just acknowledge the things that we feel positively about? And then the next one is to purposefully analyse what we can and can't control. And this is one example that I've given. So this is if your child is, and again, this is a school setting, but it really can be applied to absolutely any situation. If your child is going into school, and perhaps a lot of the families who we work with, they say their children get very overwhelmed at the thought of starting a new school, perhaps doing that entrance exam to see where they should go, new setting, and their focus is entirely on all of the unknowns. So let's see what that might look like. What is in our control? Whether or not you smile, how rested and prepared you are, how much practice you've done, how smart you look. These are all of the things that you can control. These are the things that you can work on. And these are the things that if you focus can affect change. Now let's think about what's out of our control. What's in the exam paper? What questions I'm asked? Who interviews me? How well everyone else does? Now, these are things that we can acknowledge can overwhelm us, can feel really, really scary. But what's the impact of focusing on these? You cannot control anything. So can we practice, even if it's just simply identifying what's in our control and what's not in our control? Isn't that such a gift? And I think personally how wonderful it would be able to be to not ruminate on those things that are outside our control. So can you do this with your child and whatever experience would be relevant to them? And then sometimes we have those things that sit in the middle. There are things that we can do to try and be on time, but then there's also things that are slightly out of our control. And with a younger child, it might look like there's a play date and your child just doesn't want to go onto the play date because what they're doing is they're focusing on all the things that scare them. So they're focusing perhaps on not liking the food, on getting shy, on missing us. And they're all really valid. But what are they missing? What are they not thinking about? Maybe they're not thinking about all the toys that their friend has that they don't have, or the pet that their friend has that they don't have, or perhaps that the mum is much more generous with their dessert options than you are. And doing something like this just invites your child to understand that they're only thinking of the bad things, they're only thinking of the negative and the threat. And while that might not feel like something that's in their control, can we invite the positive options? Can we invite the possibility of it not being so bad? So then for those who really do struggle, we say what's possible versus what's probable. So is it possible that the mum serves you a plate of food of things that you absolutely don't like? It's possible. Is it probable? It's unlikely, because maybe you'll call ahead and you'll explain that there are certain foods that your child just doesn't like to eat. and you can get around that issue. And if it did happen, if, for example, they were on a play date and they were given a plate of foods that they just did not feel comfortable eating, could they cope? Well, let's talk through that worst case scenario. What would happen? What words would you use to say to the parent, this is not something I feel comfortable eating? Let's go to that worst case scenario and talk about what that looks like. And then for children who really do disproportionately ruminate and worry, we invite you to create a worry list or a worry box, and seeing if they've got the opportunity, if they can, to write down their worries, to write down their concerns, and then you choose when you address it. Is it that every Sunday night they sit together with you and you go through all the things that are making them anxious? Is it a daily activity that you do before bed or you do first thing in the morning? But can they choose when they worry? Can they take slightly more control so that these thoughts aren't constantly on their mind? Again, these might not work for you, but I do invite you to try them. And quite often it's about embedding these strategies in family life. The first time you try your worry box, it doesn't mean your child will switch off from worrying the rest of the day, but maybe that when they're in a routine of knowing that they do have time with you to sit and address their anxieties, they'll learn to be able to put them aside. And the third trait of a resilient person is they question what they're thinking and what they're doing. Is it helping me or is it harming me? I think a really powerful tool, and it's something probably as adults we only learn much later on, is that we don't have to believe everything we think. And sometimes we can tell ourselves really negative things and we can think really bad thoughts that we never really question. They create feelings and we respond to them. So what might that look like? This is a diagram that we use with our children in our masterclass sessions. This might be something that works for you and your children, but our thoughts create feelings and our feelings create our actions and feedback into our thoughts. So if the thought process is, I'm not good at making friends, I'm really bad at making friends, and I feel pretty rubbish, and the chances are I'm not going to try. I'm not going to approach new people. I'm not going to be open to new social activities. And the fact that I don't go to those things just feeds into my initial thought was that I'm just not a good friend and I'm not good at making friends. But if we don't have to believe our thoughts, what if it's different? What if the thought is, I need a bit of support in making friends. It's not something I find easy. And then the feeling is hopeful. We bring that power of yet. It's not something I've mastered yet. And the action might be to ask for help, to have a go, to speak to other people about it. And then our thought is much more hopeful. This is something I'm working on. This is something I really want to improve. And I think it's a gift to explain that you don't have to believe everything you think. I think it's something we should all be told from a really early age, because as adults, we've probably thought many terrible things at different points. And to empower children and young people with this understanding that our thoughts aren't always real, I think is incredibly powerful. So here are some thinking traps. Again, this depends on your child's understanding, their ability to relate to themselves. This might work for you, this might not work for you, but I will go through them. Fortune telling. These are some thinking traps that we can fall into. And sometimes just pointing them out and acknowledging what it is that our brains are doing can help quieten those thoughts. So if it's, I'm going to fail, you're about to do something with your child and they just point blank, they're not going to do it because they're going to fail. Well, they're fortune telling. They don't actually know what is going to happen. Now, I am not saying that if you turn around to your child and say, oh, by the way, you're fortune telling, they say, oh, great, well, then let me have a go. But it's just raising their emotional intelligence. It's raising their understanding of themselves and understanding of their triggers. And you can do it to yourself. You know, I wasn't going to bake the cake because I thought to myself, I know I'm a rubbish cook. I know it's going to burn. But then I thought, I'm not a fortune teller. I don't know that it's going to burn and I'm going to give it my best shot. mind reading. All my friends think I'm boring. I think it's really powerful to point out that no matter how much you believe that, you don't actually know what other people think. And a lot of what we discuss in our online masterclass is that how other people behave is a lot about them and very little to do with you. So you don't know what your friends think. You can't control what your friends think. That if they've walked in with a sour face or they're in a very bad mood, quite often it's got absolutely nothing to do with you. And again, how old were we when we worked that out? When we realized the moody teacher at the front of the class wasn't cross with us, they were just having a really bad day. You know, let's point these things out to children. You don't know what other people are thinking. Then there's that labeling. I'm not sporty, I'm not confident, I'm not successful. This is when we use that growth mindset, the power of yet. If you want to be sporty, what do you want to do about it? Do you want to join a sports club? Do you want to watch some YouTube tutorials of how to do cartwheels, which is something that my daughter absolutely loves doing? But let's make this really empowering. And now I'm not saying that when my daughter says, oh, I'm not a good gymnast, I'm telling her that she will be at the Olympic Games. She's actually got 2 left feet like I do. But she's just not good at gymnastics yet. And if she really wants to get better, what does that look like? Let's empower children. Let's not label ourselves. And again, as parents, let's not label ourselves as not good at running, as not good at baking. Let's watch how we speak of ourselves. Next one is generalizing. I never win anything. I never get picked. I'm always last. So first of all, sometimes when children say this, it can feel very real. So when you say, oh, don't be silly, they might not actually understand. They might not have it in perspective. So let's point that out. You're generalizing. Actually, last week at football practice, you got picked second. So it feels like you never get picked because right now you're feeling really sad that you didn't. And that's really normal. But actually, it doesn't always happen. And again, I don't expect your child to be like, oh, great. Well, in that case, I don't mind I got picked last. But we're planting seeds in how they understand their world. We don't expect the whole flowers to be growing. We're just explaining. And then the next one is catastrophizing. I'm missing the party. Everyone will talk about it. No one will want to be my friends. I'm all alone. Now, again, in that moment where the child's catastrophizing, it feels very real. It really does feel like it is the absolute end of their world because they're missing the party. So again, that dismissing, oh, don't be silly, it's fine, doesn't make them think, oh, okay, fair enough, it's fine. So let's tell them what they're doing. You're catastrophizing. Not everyone will talk about the party forever. Maybe lots of people can't go to the party and you're not the only one missing out. But let's break down what is happening for them. So we have had lots of questions about our masterclass. So I thought I would take this opportunity before I share some resources to talk to you a little bit about what it looks like. I'm going to pop the link here. Oh, lovely. My 6-year-old uses a worry monster when she needs to. I think that's lovely. I put a link to sign up for a free trial of our masterclass. What it is there are live online sessions in small groups, I think maximum 6, led by one of our trained role models who tend to be teachers, mental health nurses, actors and actresses, but all trained to deliver this content in small groups. You get a 2-week free trial with the link that I just gave you. The classes are specifically for neurodiverse children, so they're with facilitators who are experienced, who will be able to break the content down, who will be able to support children in their understanding. I've got a question, will there be children of others in a similar age group? There absolutely will be. We've got an age group from 5 to 7. We've got one from 8 to 10, and then we've got 11 to 13. Now, when you sign up, you speak to either myself or somebody else in the education team for us to really understand your child. And sometimes we do place them in a different age group if we feel as though it's appropriate and perhaps the activities are more suited to a different age group. then they sit within. That's not a problem. With every session, you get a summary of what they've done. You get an activity to further embed the learning if they want, and you get a tip of something you can do as a parent. I recommend you try it. It's a 2-week free trial. See how your child responds, see if they enjoy it, see if they connect well and they get something out of it. I've put the link again. Do sign up, and I look forward to speaking to you and hearing a little bit about your child and seeing what we can do to support. And just here's, if you have any questions, it's info@rolemodels.me. Please do get in touch if you have any questions. Right, some practical ideas. I'm going to blitz through this so that we can give you some time to ask questions at the end. Praise the process and not the outcome. And I think that's really key. If we're looking to build resilience, we do not want to create perfectionists. So it's all about getting better. So if your child comes back with 10 out of 10 in a spelling test, I'm not saying don't congratulate them for it, but find the time to also praise the fact that they came home and they did it straight away, even when they wanted to go in the garden. Or if your child tries something new and they spit it out because it's absolutely repulsing to them, still praise them for trying. You had a go. You really didn't want to try that, and you did. And you pushed yourself. And I think that's really key. We do not expect perfection. We're just looking to get better. Last week, you wouldn't even have peas on your plate, and now you let them sit on your plate. That's fantastic. Neuroplasticity, that idea that our brain is growing. When things are difficult, our brain is growing. The fact that things are difficult doesn't always mean it's bad. Let's explain the process. Show me the hard bit. Let's focus in. Let's not catastrophize. A sense of humor. And sometimes we can catch ourselves doing it, you know, in the morning when it's stressful and late and we're stuck in traffic and, you know, everything feels very, very stressed. Is there sometimes an opportunity just to find it funny, just to have a bit of a laugh? I suggest you try a new skill and an activity as a family. I think quite often as parents, we want our children to step outside their comfort zone while we have the same friends, eat in the same restaurants, go to the same places, do the same things. Can we step outside our collective comfort zone? ABC is a parenting tip in the moment where it all feels a little bit too much. Can you just accept the situation for what it is, take a breath, and then you choose where to put your attention? Look for the backstory. So when your child comes back and says everybody is absolutely fantastic at cartwheels and they can't do them, nobody wakes up knowing how to do a cartwheel. So how did that kid in the class get really good? The same with footballers, right? You know, boys watching their heroes on television. Well, Ronaldo didn't wake up being the world's best footballer. Let's look at the backstory. What is it that he did to get there? Let's focus and praise the process, the effort, the dedication, and then mistakes as a family culture. Let's not hide them from our children when we make mistakes. Here are some links to some books. Quite often talking to children about feelings can be very confronting and overwhelming, and they can't connect when you ask them how they feel. So with our younger content, especially in our masterclass, we do it through stories and through characters, and it's often much easier to relate. For those of you with slightly older children, I've got some books here, and then for those who want to upskill in your parenting, we've got some book suggestions. Again, when the recording and the slides get sent around, these all have clickable links. And then again, you can follow us on Instagram. It's Role Models UK. Again, we have a lovely community and we give you updates into the things that are going on. Claire, should we have a look through the chat box and see? I think this concludes our talk. For those of you who would like to stay on and ask questions, please do. And to the rest of you, thank you so much for joining us. Let's have a look. Oh, thank you, lovely messages. Will we be offering more free sessions in the future? The sessions are always the first two. We have a 2-week free trial for Role Models Masterclass sessions. So whenever you wish to try it, the first sessions will always be free. We want to make sure that your children enjoy it and that they can access the learning and that they can benefit from it. Seeing if we've got any questions. Would you mind showing the book recommendations again for the older children? Absolutely.
I think it's worth mentioning as well, if you log off the webinar and then suddenly have a question afterwards, then feel free to either visit the SEN Expert website. My email address is on there, so you could send a question, or you can send a message on Instagram as well, because I know sometimes it can be a bit of a nerving process posting a question in a chat box. So yeah, I'm open to responding to questions after this as well, if it comes to mind at a later date.
I can't actually go back on my slides. I'm really sorry, it's not letting me go back, but these links will be sent around to you tomorrow. So the slides and the recording will be sent over, and there are clickable links. I'm really sorry, the presentation's only letting me go one way, so I do apologise that you'll get all of that information tomorrow. Teenagers, yes, we do have we partner with a charity called Skylarks, and we deliver our content to slightly older children. So if you do have a teenager and you would like to sign them onto Masterclass, please do be in touch. It's the email address is info@rolemodels.me. Give me a call, tell me about your child, and let's see what's suitable for them. I'll just put the link to the Masterclass trial. And again, Claire, I can't go back, but do you want to put your website? Are you able to put your website in the chat box? Again, it will come around with the slides when we send it back, but do reach out to us if you have any questions.
There we go.
Fantastic. Okay, well, I think that concludes our talk. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us tonight. And a huge thank you to Claire for sharing your expertise and for joining us. Please do be in touch. We'd love to speak to you again. And yeah, hopefully we'll do this again and we'll share the details. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.